And I think we've done a great job with that by bringing businesses into our community. We brought in the Allstate, we brought in Idaho Central. I mean, there's several businesses that have come to our community and are helping to build that tax base. And in doing so, they've increased the amount of money we have to spend for development. The second item is that we need to make development pay for their own improvements, make them pay for their roads, make them pay for their water lines, make them pay for their sewer lines, and that in turn can be turned around and put into the budget and will help pay for itself. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Parrish?
Let me state unequivocally, I am not a fan of increasing the budget at all. I think we need to maintain a minimum level of service provided for our needs without increasing that budget. What we do is go out and build our communities by bringing in more industry, more development, and increase the size of our tax base so that we can meet our needs and then pass that savings back on to our citizens by reducing their costs, by charging them less for water and sewer and garbage service. Not keeping it at the same cost and going out and doing more stuff. I don't want to go out and do more stuff. Let's do the minimum we're doing and make that work and give us a break back as citizens so we're not paying as much as we're paying now. I'm not just a fan of not increasing our taxes, I'm a fan of decreasing them back down to where they ought to be in order to provide the minimum services without reaching beyond that. We do that by bringing in business, by bringing in industry, bringing in those that build our tax base so that we can decrease the cost to us and maintain that budget without the increase. I don't think there's a need for the increase. I think we can find some efficiencies within the existing system and actually save some money so that we can do the work that needs to be done. It doesn't mean they're not doing a good job of that, because I know they are trying. But I think if we put another set or two of eyes on that and say, yeah, well, what about this and what about that? Create a committee that would do that in order to improve some of those efficiencies and keep that budget where it's at, or maybe even reduce it, put some money back in your pockets.
Thank you. Mr. Griffin?
Well, it's been mentioned a couple of times already that there are two sides to a budget. There's the income and there's the expenditure, and I think if we want to continue to maintain or improve the services that the city offers, the first side of that equation is to improve the income side of the budget through, as been mentioned, economic development, growth, providing an atmosphere and opportunities for families to move in so that personal property tax revenues and business tax revenues are increased, and we'll have the money to do the things that we need to do. The same level of service in the future is likely going to cost more money. Everything else goes up. I don't think we should expect that the kind of services we want to provide are going to do anything different. And so to order to accommodate that, we have to have the economic growth and development that will support that increased expenditure without placing additional burdens on the citizens that we already have.
Thank you. Mr. Collier?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. How are you planning to keep spending within the budget or lower, yet expand and grow the city?
You know, there's been a lot of criticism of the Northwest Interceptor sewer system. Had the economy kept up and kept rolling the way it was, that interceptor system would have totally paid for itself and probably more than that. And it just so happened that nobody could see the economy tanking like it did, and it left us in a difficult situation. The thing that I see is that just as soon as this economy gets going again, we will be in a position for a lot of growth, and that interceptor system will be key to that growth because we'll have the infrastructure to accept the growth. We also chose to complete the Knutson Boulevard. Knutson Boulevard will bring us money. It will create revenue. If we'd have not done that and done some of the repaving and rebuilding of our streets, that does not contribute, except for appearance-wise, to to the growth that we could have had. And so I think that we made a wise decision, and we're on track for solving the problem.
Thank you. Mr. Kremer?
We've heard a lot tonight about the Chubbuck Development Authority. We need to remember that the funds that they have are very fluid. They're not locked in like a budget in tax dollars. For several years, it's been on the agenda to repair roads in Chubbuck. Each year, the CDA, rather than repair the roads, has discovered that if they would put their funds into infrastructure, it will bring long-term dividends in the tax base. That was evident with the Knutson experience, along with the Evans Boulevard. The CDA took their funds that they had earmarked for road repair and put those into infrastructure for Knutson Boulevard, Evans Lane, and with those two improvements, we brought in tax base, Idaho Central Credit Union, and we'll probably have the businesses move in on Evans Lane. As that happens, that keeps our spending down for the taxpayer, as we have a budget to work with a good tax base from business. So the CDA, every time we hear them say we're going to put $9 million or $11 million into roads next year, remember, if an opportunity comes up, the roads will be put on a back burner and will only be repaired by the city budget. Those CDA funds are used to create business or tax base so that we grow with responsible, we're responsible for the growth. It comes not as an avalanche of tax spending to us.
Thank you. Mr. Ellis?
I remember when my father-in-law used to tell me that he could fill up his gas tank for $1, and I used to chuckle. But I can remember when I could buy gas for 99 cents, and when it went to $1.04 when I was in high school, that was the end of the world. Well, now you look at gas in the mid-3s, approaching 4. There is not any service that the city provides that will be cheaper next year. The fuel to run the fire trucks, the fuel to run the police cars, all of that will be more expensive next year. The city's power bill is more expensive this year than it was last year. We have to look at growing the budget, not by raising taxes, but by increasing our tax base. As we do that, we will be able to improve the services that we have and maintain our taxes. We are not the highest in the state. I sell real estate. One of the very first questions people ask, what are the taxes on these homes? And between Pocatello and Chubbuck, it is still far better for someone to look at a home in Chubbuck than it is in Pocatello. In addition to that, the Chubbuck Development Authority, that TIF district, expires in 9 years. We have an excellent opportunity. Most TIF districts do not allow you to rebuild roads. We have to look at growing that so that within 9 years we can replace as many roads as possible, because once it expires, we have to renegotiate.
Thank you. Before this next question starts with Mr. Mansfield, if you have questions in the audience, if you raise your hands, a volunteer can come and bring you a card, and she'll take that back from you and get it up here. So, starting with Mr. Mansfield, do you feel that private property rights, such as restrictive covenants, should give way to zoning changes?
Do I feel private property rights should give way to restrictive zoning covenants?
Private property rights, such as restrictive covenants,
Okay.
should give way to zoning changes.
Zoning changes. You know, I'm never an advocate of taking away private property rights, and I think that it's important that people, that's really what our country is founded on, is private property and the ability to have that property and to be able to kind of do with it what you want. And so I think it's important that we recognize that individuals have private property rights, and that we shouldn't necessarily have a cookie cutter mold that they need to be fit into. And I think it's important that we recognize that people pay a lot of money, and they put their livelihood into their property, and most people, for the most part, are going to take care of that property, and they're going to keep it up to the current codes.
Thank you. Mr. Parrish?
C.S. Lewis, a Christian writer in the early 20th century, in one of his musings said, it's possible that someday the government's even going to have the power to tell us what we can and can't do with our property. It bothers me, because we're there. And I couldn't be more opposed. I buy a piece of property subject to the restrictive covenants that I bought them under, and I ought to be able to expect that it will stay that way for the life of the property that I own. I do not believe that government has the authority, or should have the authority, to come in and change all that through some sort of zoning restriction. I bought it with the rights that are incumbent upon it. If the city wants to come and change that, they have to pay me with the value of that right. I don't want my city spending my tax dollars doing that. My property rights are sacrosanct. Stay off of them. Leave it alone. I don't want more government intrusion in my life. I don't want more government telling me what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. I want less. Less is more. Less government is better. Ron Reagan said the scariest phrase he'd ever heard in his life was, I'm the government and I'm here to help. Please don't help me. I can do this myself. I don't want your help. Don't come and rezone and change my property rights based on somebody else's idea of what's in my best interest. Get out of my life.
Thank you. Mr. Pippin?
Well, one of the things that I've learned in 20 plus years in higher education is that one of the fundamental founding elements of citizenship in this country is the ownership of private property. It used to be that you couldn't vote in this country if you weren't a property owner. That's pretty much no longer the case, but I think an individual's right to own property and to do with it what he or she determines is fundamental to our American way of life. Now, there are some cases where an individual's use of his or her private property creates a hazard in some way for neighbors. There ought to be at least some minimal level of regulation there, but as long as it's not hurting your neighbor, causing a health hazard, things like that, an individual ought to be able to do with his property what he so desires, and using things like eminent domain in order to seize or to alter the use of the property. I generally would discourage that.
Thank you. Mr. Collier?
I suppose I am for eminent domain, but only in a very, very limited situation, and as has been explained. In fact, the state put out some guidelines to cities called what it means to take a piece of property. By rules and regulations and zoning, they can gradually take your property. And those guidelines, for instance, if they say, okay, you've got a piece of property, but you don't have access to that, they have taken your piece of property. And they can do it by degrees, by small increments, and if we follow those guidelines, I think that we'll maintain and preserve the property rights of the citizenry, and we need to do that.
Thank you. Mr. Kramer?
Private property rights in the West, it's been hashed over a lot. We buy our property, we expect it to be maintained, and we pay for services. What we don't expect is someone to come in and tell us that we have to paint it a certain color, or they're going to take 10 feet for a road, or if they want to take portions of that and they're going to make changes. We buy our property with the expectation that we will be able to live there and develop that in a manner that's pleasing and pleasant to look at. We have codes in place in the city to make sure that property is taken care of. Those codes are fine and they work well in the city and they're enforced here in Chubbuck. But to go in and say, we're going to take your property for this certain development would be unfair unless you were compensated a fair market value. What we do have, the zoning changes. Zoning changes don't take place overnight. Zoning changes take a long amount of time and they have to go through several committees. Your position can be made public and everyone will know it, but no, I I am not in favor of zoning changes infringing on the private property rights of the citizens.
Thank you. Mr. Ellis?
The only thing that is constant is change. The city of Chubbuck was a small bedroom community when it started. Chubbuck Road is now one of the busiest roads in the city. And as you look at those homes that are on that street, many of them do not sell for the same value as a home in other subdivisions because they're on a major arterial road. Zoning and planning and comprehensive plans are designed to make adjustments and look at changes as they happen throughout the city. I believe in honoring personal property rights. This is America. The challenge is my rights also probably need to end at my neighbor's property. And then we live in a community, and so you have to balance those needs. I feel that if people take the time and look at what the city of Chubbuck does in order to show comprehensive planning for where things should be, where should the commercial zones be, where should residential zones be, where should the industrial zones be. Those are the things that you want to use as you plan a community, recognizing that over time, things will change.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis?
Thank you. I too agree. Private property rights are very important. A wise local judge has been quoted many times as saying, "Be careful what you wish for. You just might get it." We have to strike a careful balance between unlimited private property rights and restriction. Do we want to allow our private property rights to be so great that we have health and safety issues that cannot be enforced and corrected because the code doesn't do that? It'd be my position that no, we don't want to get to that point. At the same time, we don't want to control every single decision that a landowner is going to make when they want to build a shed or modify their property in some fashion. Every single candidate up here has talked today, I believe, about the importance of growth. One of the driving factors of bringing businesses to this community is that it be a beautiful place to live. In order to do that, we're required to have responsible codes and responsible enforcement of codes. If we don't do that, who's going to want to come to Chubbuck? Now, the thing that we have to take care of is that we strike the proper balance. Do we just go in and take away the right to build? No. But if somebody's living in a place and zoning changes on Yellowstone Avenue and they can't make later a change, that's going to be part of the comprehensive plan that Chubbuck's put in place.
I see Mr. Lewis's evil genius, because I can't cut him off. This next one will start with Mr. Parrish. Where do you see the future of Chubbuck going if you are elected?
Initially, I have to question about the wise local judge. I want a name on that. Who is that? We're going to grow. It's going to happen. We're not going to retract. Even in the darkest days of economic life in our community, when BE shut down, when FMC shut down, when the railroad moved most of their operation to Ogden, we're still growing. That's not going to change. The question is, how do we shape that growth? How do we make it the kind of growth we want? Nobody wants to live next to the sewage plant. We have to have one of those so that we can all live here. Nobody wants to live next to some industrial area. We have to have those so that we can live here and have jobs for our people. We've got to control that growth so that we have mills and mines and smelters and manufacturing, agriculture. That's where real jobs are at. Everything else is simply a service to that. Have we got those areas outlined in our city where that industry is invited and welcome to come in? Are we content to just be a bedroom community in Pocatello? We're just providing housing for people that work over there. Because that's going to come to an end pretty darn quick. We've got to create a community where we are welcoming and inviting manufacturing industry here to be a part of what we do, not just services that service those who really have jobs. We need to create that right within our communities here. We have the areas to do it, we have the ability to do it, we have to have the drive to do it, and convince our neighbors that it's the right answer. The answer is not just to be a bedroom community next door to someplace that really lives and exists.
Thank you. Mr. Pippin?
Well, in terms of the future of Chubbuck, as Craig noted, it's going to be a continued period of growth, and we need to have, I think, plans in place and understand what the plans are so that we can address challenges that come up, whether it be trying to raise the tax revenue through increased property value, attractions to business, so that helps our tax revenue. I'm optimistic about where Chubbuck is going. I look forward to being a part of it, to see what we can do, to find another Allstate, if you will, to help fund the kind of growth that we're going to have to undergo. So I think it's positive. And on one sense, I hope Craig is right about more manufacturing jobs. The trend isn't that way, but he's right about where the high wage jobs are, and those are the kinds of things we need to go out and find the people that might want to relocate here, invite them in, show them around. This is what we have to offer, and let's see how we can work together to make it happen.
Mr. Collier?
Would you repeat?
Sure. Where do you see the future of Chubbuck going if you are elected?
Well, as I mentioned before, I think that with the infrastructure that we have, we are poised for some really great growth as far as it being able to attract businesses such as Allstate or Idaho State Credit Union. We also are in a position for creating new subdivisions which will bring in a greater tax base.
Thank you. Mr. Craner?
The growth of Chubbuck is going to take place. It doesn't matter if we're in an economic boom or in a recession. We've continued to grow steadily. In fact, the 2001 copy of Our Vision, Our Valley projected our growth. And believe it or not, in 2001, we're right on task with what they projected. We're at almost 15,000 residents in Chubbuck. So it's a no-brainer. We are growing steadily. What we have to do is we have to have managed growth and smart development. In 2001, the Chubbuck Comprehensive Plan was developed along with the Our Valley, Our Vision. It was then decided that we needed to protect the public health, safety, and the welfare by providing a managed growth module. So what we need to do, we have good subdivisions make good neighborhoods. Good neighbors may bring good citizens, and good citizens make great communities. As we look at Chubbuck, we have our commercial, our R1, 2, 3, and 4, and we also have PUDs in place for the development of the city. We do that so that the infill of the city is taken up so that developers can make money and develop the blighted areas of the city, but also our peripheral areas, we're able to grow them in neighborhoods that are compatible with what they are next to. So rather than having an R1 neighborhood and then right across the street developing a 150-home high-density apartment, that's what the Our Valley, Our Vision concept is about, protection of rights.
Thank you. Mr. Ellis?
As your next city council member for the next 4 years, I hope to continue to build a beautiful community. I would ask you to look at what I've been able to accomplish over the last 4 years as I've been on the city council. The entrance to the city of Chubbuck has made huge strides. It's become more attractive. There are new buildings. They're paying us higher property taxes because they're valued at more. I would continue to reach out and look for the jobs. Many times, people that probably don't need or want the growth, they will say, I wish my kids and my grandkids were closer. Well, I'm one of those kids, and I have the grandkids. And the way that you do that is you have to find jobs. I'm excited about my relationship with the city of Pocatello and Bannock County, and the relationships that I've forged that will allow me to continue to go out and sell this great community. This is a great community that we live in. And when people find out, some of them will just return home. It won't be people coming from California, although Allstate does have some individuals that once they came here temporarily, decided to make this place home. But many of the people that were born here and raised here, they'll find their way back home, and that's what I hope to do over the next 4 years.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis?
My vision for the future of Chubbuck is a place where my children can raise their grandchildren and I can enjoy them. We can retain the benefits of the beautiful residential areas that we have, and at the same time enjoy new growth and development commercially that we presently don't have. As we do those two things, Chubbuck's just going to have a tax base increase that will allow it to do things that it hasn't been able to do in the past without commercial development, where it's relied principally on residential tax base. What people have told me, a primary thing that I've heard as I have been out talking, is people want more for their money. They want increased services for less, and I think we have to be wise stewards as city leaders. But they also would like to see increased growth in commercial services, and we're poised to do that. The Chubbuck vision of the future that I have is something that grows commercially, that gives us the ability to add some of the beautification that you might see in larger cities, and I think that we're sitting well to accomplish that. I think we have to bring businesses to town and show them what we have. Show them that we have an educated workforce with Idaho State University. Show them that we have beautiful surrounding areas. People will want to come here if they see it. That's my vision for Chubbuck.
Thank you. Mr. Mansfield?
Thank you. As I heard this question, I was reminded of many of you may know Mary Harker. I remember her pounding the pulpit saying, "Let Chubbuck be Chubbuck." And she was very adamant that, we needed to be our own community, and we needed to develop ourselves, and we needed to, kind of retain our own identity. And as I've lived here for the past 15 years, I've really come to appreciate that. When my wife and I first started a family, we lived down on 8th Street, right by Idaho State University, and we lived on a very busy street. And my son, he liked to golf, and I remember him out there hitting his golf ball down 8th Street and in the middle of traffic, and he was running out, in the middle of this traffic and almost getting hit. And we decided, at that time it was time for something different for our family. And we chose Chubbuck, and we moved on Trent Street, and then about 5 years later we bought another house. And the stipulation was, when we bought our new house, is that it had to be in the city of Chubbuck. I see the city of Chubbuck growing. I mean, if you look at the population projections for the city of Chubbuck, it has continuously increased, and it's going to continue to increase. I'm reminded of a quote: "If you fail to plan, you plan to fail." And as a council member and as a civil engineer, I help communities plan, and I help them to develop sensibly and logically and develop in a logical manner.
This next question will go first to Mr. Pippin. It's regarding retail and revitalization of the retail area. How do you plan to reinvigorate the mall, bring retail restaurants like Target, Olive Garden, and if you feel there are any derelict buildings along Yellowstone, how would you plan to remove those? That's a big...
That's okay. Thank you. Well, let me start with what I think the easy answer is first in terms of the direction that I see Chubbuck City going in terms of revitalization along Yellowstone Avenue is a positive direction. It's not so much that I've seen a matter of going in and taking out what may be old, not so attractive, things like that, but a matter of other kinds of entities coming in that can replace that in a much more attractive manner. So I think that's the kind of trend, if you will, that needs to continue. With regard to the mall, that's a difficult challenge because there are those who feel like one of the things that most malls that I've observed have are anchor stores, and sometimes the anchor stores that have come in, I'm not quite sure, not having worked in retail, but I'm not quite sure how how targeted those kinds of stores are with regard to what do people in Chubbuck want to buy, and what's the income level that's going to support those purchases. And those are the kinds of retail establishments I think that that the mall management needs to work on getting in here. And so I think working with those who would come into the mall and trying to target that clientele and match that up with the new businesses would be what I think needs to happen.
Thank you. Mr. Collier?
I think with regards to the mall, that the city could probably lend more support, direct support, in bringing some of these stores that would occupy the mall. From what I understand, when Allstate was trying to make their decision, that Mayor Blatt and Mayor England and Commissioner Hadley and several others made a trip back to Allstate headquarters for the purpose of promoting the area, and not one particular city, but the area. And it seems to me that maybe on a more limited basis or some basis we can provide a service to the mall to help bring in some of these stores. And certainly if the mall is full and functioning, then it will be doing well and we will be doing well.
Thank you. Mr. Kramer?
I think when we talk about the mall, we have to remember this is private enterprise and government. We can help, but we don't go in and give the store away. There's a fine line there. We look at what happened to Pocatello with the Hoku plant. Government wanted to go in and give concessions, and it turned around to backfire on them. We can give some concessions and help with infrastructure, but private enterprise has to stand on their own. That's been what our country's been based on, capitalism. Now, as far as the restaurant of Olive Garden, a month or two ago, there was a symposium at ISU, and there was a panel of about 16 businessmen there. One of those businessmen happened to be Park Price. And he said, when the question came up about the Olive Garden, he says, we have an Olive Garden in Idaho Falls. He says, you have a Red Lobster in Pocatello. Perhaps we could just swap, and you send us your Red Lobster, and we'll send you vice versa. What that company decides to do is private enterprise again. We'll give them some discounts to move here, but we can't move them here ourselves.
Thank you. Mr. Ellis?
The way that you attract retail is you go out and you actively pursue jobs. Retail establishments, before they come into a community, do an extensive amount of research to determine the buying power of the individuals that live there. Allstate will have 800 plus employees. Average salary is $27,000, and that's probably on the low end. That's over $21 million of wages to our family, friends, and neighbors. Even if you take a portion of that and you say that only 10% of that is discretionary, and then you use a multiplier effect, normally they'll say times it by 7. Even if we're conservative and we times it by 3 or by 4, the way that you grow retail is you have to go out and you actively have to pursue bringing jobs into the area, because jobs is what will allow them to spend their money at these different retail establishments. As they see the money that we're spending, they will come. They want to make money. So as we have money to spend and as we spend it, those retail establishments will come. And I think you can see that that's already starting to happen in the city of Chubbuck currently.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis?
This is a tricky question. First of all, it's really at odds with the prior question about private property rights. It asks what my plans are to reinvigorate and remove derelict buildings. The city does not govern and control the private property, what people do with their private property, unless it's violating certain things. However, city officials can do things that will help and facilitate private individuals to have a desire to come to Chubbuck, to make changes, to be reinvigorated. And that's a delicate balance. I think that something that's key is in the retail sector is if we want retail to come to Chubbuck, we have to stop going to Idaho Falls to spend money. Or the retail is going to keep going to Idaho Falls where money's being spent. And so as citizens, we need to be sensitive that our actions will influence what comes to Chubbuck. As also, our figureheads, the city figureheads, need to go out and sell the city. And I know that has been done and is being done. And as they see what good things Chubbuck has, and as we support our local retail establishments, more will come.
Mr. Mansfield?
You know, as a father that has a daughter who's just about ready to turn a teenager, I'd almost recommend just closing the mall for the next 10 years. She loves the mall, so no, I'm just kidding. But you know, as been mentioned several times, I mean, this is private enterprise, and really there's limited amount that government officials can do in the directions that they take. You know, as government officials, we can guide them and we can help them and work with them in a partnership. You know, we just recently had our Chubbuck Days celebration, and I was really impressed with the number of businesses that we had at that celebration. I mean, Smith's was a perfect example. You know, they were out there handing out water to people as they were walking by, and you know, the manager down there, he knows me by name, and he asks my wife how the campaign's going, and he asks how our kids are going. And I mean, that's the kind of businesses we need in our community, and we need to make sure that we're supporting those businesses.